Good morning, everybody. I'm so excited to be back. Banter with Beth is back. It's our first day back since we took our summer hiatus, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you guys. I'm excited to see who's going to show up today. We have an amazing guest for you this morning, but I want to just welcome everybody and explain what Banter with Beth is, who I am, why we're here. I'm Beth Lane. You're on the Beth Lane Film channel on IGTV, and I am the executive producer, director, and writer of the documentary feature film Would You Hide Me, which is about 7 Jewish siblings who were hidden for 2 years outside of Berlin during World War II, the youngest of which is my mom. And we're in post-production right now. We are so excited to be part of the 2022 Film Festival circuit. So we're close. We're not quite there yet. We're close. Good morning, Robin. Good morning, Mai. What are we doing here on IGTV? We are raising Holocaust awareness. So the guests that I bring on, scientists, authors, artists, it's a long list of activists, scholars, clergy. We all talk about how we can raise Holocaust awareness in our society and really exercise the muscle of empathy and compassion. So that's what we're doing here. I am speaking to you from the ancestral lands of the Chumash people. I'm here in Ojai today. And for those of you that are visually impaired, I'm a Caucasian woman with long brown hair, and I'm wearing little round glasses. I've got turquoise necklace on, and I'm wearing a kind of an olivey linen dress. And I'm sitting in my office, which is painted white. But without further ado, good morning, Fern. Good morning, Leah. I am going to bring on my guest, Fern Schumer Chapman, who is just an extraordinary woman. Fern is the author of this incredible book, Motherland, and we'll talk even more about that when she comes on. So I'm going to bring Fern on, and I'm so excited for you guys to meet her. She's written this amazing, amazing book. Good morning, Josh. So let's see if Fern is able to make the connection. And there you are. Good morning. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Fern? She's just,
There we go. Hi.
yeah. Hi. How you doing this morning?
Good. Thank you so much for having me, Beth. I'm really honored to
It's
be your guest.
I'm thrilled to have you join us today, and I just want to make sure everybody throw in the little chat there if you can see Fern clearly, if you can hear Fern, because I don't want you guys to miss a word of what she has to say. um, Fern, you have written this book Motherland, which I'm aware is you published it 20 years ago, and so you're probably more accustomed to talking about the books that you've most recently published, right? And there have been so many. Oh, there's my mom. She joined. Good morning, Mom. Um, but you're probably more accustomed to speaking about books that you've published more recently. But I really, and so I want to talk about those as well. But I really want to focus on Motherland, which is what blew me away when I read it. This was a page turner, unlike other books that I've been pouring myself into regarding the Holocaust. And I think the reason is because this sense of going back to our mothers' homes with them to see how they are experiencing, um, returning to a place that wasn't necessarily filled with good memories at all, and how that has affected their lives and where they place themselves in their communities and so forth, and what they're doing. So let's just dive right in and tell me about the process by which you decided to actually write down. Did you know before you went on this trip with your mom back to Germany that you were going to write a book?
No. Well, first let me say thanks to Beth's mom for passing my book along to her. And The answer to your question is no, I had no idea. My mother came from a very small town in Germany. There were 2,000 people and only 2 Jewish families. And because of the size of the town, there was an intimacy when we returned. Everyone remembered her family. And as a result, it was a very intense experience to return. And when I was there, I realized I had this window that no one else had because it was so small. And consequently, I took copious notes and ultimately did write the book that captured my mother's and my journey back to her small hometown. So it's a memoir, but it's not only about the Germans and who we encountered there and the legacy of this.
Uh-oh, I think we lost your sound. Oh, there.
Also, how it transformed my relationship with her as a result of taking this trip and how we became more bonded as a result of it. And I think it's important at this point to say that a lot of survivors and refugees didn't know how to handle the trauma of this. And so the way they coped was to never speak of their own history.
Right.
And that was my experience. So when we went there, my mother suddenly felt an obligation to talk about her life and history and how her childhood immigration, where she fled Nazi Germany as an unaccompanied minor, all by herself in 1938, had defined her. And of course, almost everybody else in the family was murdered.
Right. Yeah, it's an exceptional read, on top of which you're a beautiful, beautiful writer. I want to read to everybody just this first passage that I think was, I don't know, I was just drawn in immediately. You guys can imagine, I read a lot of books. and sometimes you just kind of get like, oh, and this is what the prologue, you just had me hooked. I never thought of my mother as a Holocaust survivor. She was one of the lucky ones. She had been spared, had never faced the horrors of the Nazi death camps. Yet when she was only 12, she lost everything but life itself, her home, her family, her language, her loyalties, her identity. And I suppose it just resonated so much with my mother's story. She came over when she was 6, and my mother had a different experience than your mother in many, many ways. But there's this idea of identity, of losing identity and losing your motherland, losing your homeland. My mother was adopted by a family, and subsequently, because of the prevailing sentiment in 1946-47, she did not see her biological siblings anymore after she was adopted, even though they were in the same neighborhood. So, right or wrong, that's what happened in 1946, 47, 48. And it took 40 years for them to reunite. So for your mom to go back to this town, it was 70 years?
65 years after she had fled.
65 years after she had fled. Okay. Yeah. What do you think it was that really made her decide to do it?
Well, I was 6 months pregnant with my 3rd child. I had 2 sons, and I think I had been talking quite a bit about my desire to have a daughter. And that probably forced some reflection as to our relationship, which had been very limited by the fact that so much of her history was off limits. So I think she started to think about why we couldn't talk about things, and hope that maybe this would be an opportunity for us to get a little bit closer. But I think there's another piece of it, which is she did have a sister. And like your mother, she was placed in a separate home. And it was her sister's desire to return to the town. The sister passed away, and then I think my mother felt that she had an obligation to not only her sister, but herself to face her history.
Right. And again, that's a similar circumstance. My uncle Alphonse passed away in 2016. He and my mom had become very close once they reunited. And he had spent several travel experiences going back to the town of Voreen where they were hidden to meet the town historians and get to know the town a little bit so that he could make an application to Yad Vashem to honor the farmers who hid them in the Guards of the Righteous. And I think it wasn't until my uncle passed away, my mom's brother, that she said, okay, I've never been back. And this is really an offering to Alphonse, who left us too soon. He left us, even though he was well into his 80s, he was a vibrant man, and he left us too soon. So to continue this legacy, and I think that I'd love to hear from you regarding your experience as a second generation survivor. There's a group of people now called 2G, and that stands for second generation survivors. And I didn't even know that existed until I was asked to speak at a 2G meeting at the Seattle Holocaust Center for Humanity. So I'm curious to know if you ever knew anything about 2G and that community, and if you've engaged with them at all. With us.
First of all, let me say that there has been a debate and a distinction about who constitutes a survivor. And people like my mother and your mother don't necessarily fall into the strict category of who is a survivor. So a survivor typically is somebody who has survived the camps. My mother, your mother, escaped. There are the hidden children who, I think what struck me is that while my mother did not, thankfully, have to live through the camps, she endured all the losses. And so when I start Motherland by saying I never knew my mother was a Holocaust survivor, I'm really raising this question. Is she a Holocaust survivor, or isn't she a Holocaust survivor? And because so many of those who survived identify with this survivor label, they have a community. But in my mother's case, there weren't enough people who identified as a refugee to create a community. And so she had a secondary loss, which is, who was she? I remember at an event where we attended, and the speaker asked all the survivors in the audience to stand up. Well, my mother did this funny dance where she sort of stood up and then sat down, and stood up and sat down, because she doesn't know if she fits into that category.
Wow, that's I can speak for my mom. Mom, you can put something in the comments here if you want to speak up for yourself. But I know that my mother has had that same struggle and has talked about that at length with other survivors and with some museum curators and so forth. And I think at this point, I have certainly taken the liberty of saying, Mom, you are a survivor. You were.
Well, I told my mother to stand up. And
yes.
Actually, so much of the book Motherland is about an exploration of not just my mother surviving this as a refugee, but also how this is transmitted in the family. Right. And I also have spoken to some 2G people, the second generation, and the experiences are very similar because the parents were so profoundly defined by this experience that they can't help but transmit some of that to the children.
Right. That's right. That's right. And I think also now with the age of everybody, and we're losing so many survivors, rapid a pace, that it's important for us to continue to talk about it, keep their legacies alive. I certainly never thought I would be making the movie I'm making right now during this moment in history. And I'm so glad that I am, because we need to bring Holocaust awareness back into the conversation. And yes, it needs to broaden and widen to genocide awareness and what's going on globally. But that's not to lose sight of Holocaust awareness. And I think that there's so much that we can do to educate and to really help people understand that There is no other. We are all one. There is no other. There are a couple other passages in your book that I want to share with everybody. That
Well, I want to add one comment to what you just said.
please, yeah.
And that is that it's not just about Holocaust education and awareness, which is extremely relevant, and genocides, of course, but trauma and how trauma is transmitted in families and how the children are often defined by the parents' hiding of this topic or their erratic behavior because they are so haunted by their losses.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I mean, can you speak to that for yourself? How did you feel that your mother's trauma was passed down through to you?
Well, in some ways, Motherland is an attempt to come to terms with it.
Sure, sure.
You know, there are very specific characteristics. And one thing that happens often in immigrant families, but particularly with Holocaust refugees or survivors, is that the children become the public face, or they become the caregiver to the parent because the parent lost love at such a young age. And so you very much have an inversion of relationships that occurs.
Right.
And in my case, I felt extremely responsible for my mother. And at the same time, I struggled with resentment that I felt robbed of my own childhood and my own experiences because hers was so dominant in our lives.
Right, right. And that is the point of departure, I think, where our stories really do to take two very different angles and turns, because that was not my experience. But how I have always questioned why I have had certain kind of knee-jerk reactions to all kinds of things in life from a very, very young age. Why do I feel compelled to stand up for this person or march over here or, become engaged with things that have to do with activism? And that was not my upbringing at all. My family never talked about politics at the table. My family didn't go to marches. We weren't, that's just not who we were. So it's interesting to see where in our lives and when and why we decide to step forward and engage with it. And I think my mother would say that it has been kind of this insatiable curiosity of mine since I was a child. And in her instance, I don't think it was so much that she didn't want to share with me and didn't want to tell with me, even though as a child I felt like I was being shut out. She just didn't have the memories,
Right.
She was so young, and as soon as she started this new life, she just shut the door on them because, she lost her language. She doesn't speak a lick of German anymore. It was wonderful to read in your book, hearing your mom speaking in German and Yiddish. And but I do want to read these two other passages in here that blew me away. You say here, I guess I'm jumping from the prologue to the epilogue, because you say, things we have felt with great intensity, Virginia Woolf once wrote, have an existence independent of our minds, are in fact still in existence. And then you say, those who experience the war or its half-life know that it lives on. The war's clock has no numbers, no spring, no plug to pull. And I feel like what you are talking about here with this great intensity, this connection to it, it's like an umbilical cord.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about post-traumatic stress disorder. Holocaust survivors and refugees are the second largest group behind war veterans who struggle with PTSD. And of course, their children then follow as well. And when I'm referring to the life going on and it living within my mother and certainly living within me, in many ways, I am referring to the PTSD that she suffered with that has now been transmitted to me, and my responsibility to cope with it for myself and manage it for myself.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. I absolutely can. There's this sense of the other thing that was so fascinating to me is how your mother and my mother alike are so willing to forgive. Not that it's easy for them
Yeah.
to do it, but they are willing to forgive. And I find myself being so like, mama bear, I'm gonna have your back and defend you at all costs, no matter what trail I leave behind. And that's just not my mom's experience at all.
Well, you know, I think I can't speak for your mother, but in my mother's case, a couple of things. She lost her sense of self-agency at a very young age. She had no choice in what happened to her.
Right.
And as a result, there was kind of a learned helplessness that occurred at 12. And I think after that, it was very hard to find a voice. Now, it's interesting, she's 96, and she finally has discovered her voice. And a lot of it is because we give school presentations, and she has heard me tell her story over and over again. And the kids are actually the witness for the story. And actually, if you're going to heal trauma, you have to have two things. You have to tell the story or have the story told, and you need witnesses.
Yes.
And so the school settings have actually created a psychological safe space for her so that she could heal and find her own voice. And, you know, Beth, it's funny because I give a lot of speeches, and I used to see her sitting way in the back of the audience. And I'd say, my mom's here with us today. Can you say hello, Mom? And, you know, you'd see this little person wave. But little by little, she started to move up in the audience. And eventually, she said to me after about a year or two of speeches that she wanted to come up and answer questions at the microphone.
Oh, my gosh.
So you could see this process of healing throughout.
What a gift you've given her. Beautiful. That's really incredible.
Well, I mean, I tease her and I say, you know, I gave you what modern medicine, psychology couldn't help you with. And the reason I kid her about that is, you know, PTSD has only been identified and addressed in the last 15 years. Yeah. So for those who suffered through the Holocaust, that help was not available.
Right. That's absolutely right. No question about it. Yeah. Yeah. It's something that I think in the state of California in the next month or two, in addition to 911, we're now going to have a phone number, and I shouldn't say it here because I don't know if it's right, but I think it's 988, that if you're having a mental health crisis, that you can call basically a 911 number to help you with your mental health crisis. And progress, it's, you know, it's late in the game, but it's progress, right? And mental health is just something that we as a nation have to take so much more seriously. You and I both share that we're from Chicago. You're still in Chicago, right?
Yes.
Yes, yes. And how are you finding the response to all of the, I guess, the gunfire that's happening in Chicago and dealing with all of that PTSD and fear and danger?
It's horrifying. And I absolutely see the same tendencies and the same trends in the African American community that I saw in myself and the refugees and survivors I've come to know. And that is that there was deep trauma in the culture, which was transmitted and was never addressed, and it continues to disturb generation after generation. And I think that this is a very long-standing family problem, which, you know, I think it was Isabel Wilkerson who made that wonderful point, which is you can't build a house on a cracked foundation.
Right.
And until you start to address the cracked foundation that our country is built upon, you will continue to have this very sad and disturbing situation. Yeah. That is fueled by trauma.
Yeah, yeah, it's terrible. My friend Mai just put in the chat here that 988 is the nationwide mental health crisis number. So if anybody ever needs that, just know that it's 988. I want to give everyone a chance to put questions into the chat. So if anybody has questions for Fern, please feel free to put them in the chat or any thoughts. I can tell you want to say something, Fern. Go for it.
I wanted to go back a little bit because you
Yeah.
said that your mother did not consciously make the decision not to tell you. She simply didn't remember. And I certainly believe that. My mother did make the conscious decision not to tell me any of her history. And the reason was, how do you even begin to tell a child this story and that your parents were murdered? And so as a result, there were these hints and these little glimpses of her history, but I did not understand the context. And in a lot of ways, it's extremely traumatizing to see that something has deeply defined a parent, but have absolutely no context for what happened and why it happened.
Right, right, right. I remember very specifically the moment I learned my mom was adopted. I don't remember when I learned that she was a survivor. But I do have these memories of being in Hebrew school and beginning to learn about the Holocaust at a very young age, knowing that my family had that story in it. And it's weird, it's murky, it's memory, it's, so much of what I'm trying to address in Would You Hide Me is memory. And what do we do with memory? And how do we have it serve our lives today to help our society as a people come together? And I think you really address memory in here quite a bit, especially with all of these relationships that your mom reestablishes when she goes back to the town.
Right. And that fits into what you were saying earlier, that she doesn't really tap into her anger. She is bewildered by why this happened and how could it have happened. And she was very desirous of returning to her small town so they could look her in the eye and see who she really was.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of courage in it as well.
Oh my gosh, so much courage, especially to be able to go back to a town that did not stand up for her and her family when they could have, but they didn't. And for her to go in and say, I'm still here. Look me in the eye because I'm still here.
Well, so I've written, as you know, many books that follow some of what happened as a result. And one of the most powerful moments my mother and I had in the little town is some of the Lutheran church leaders brought us into the church. And the woman who led the church read us a letter apologizing that the church did not protect her during this terrible time. And actually, I have captured some of that in my book, Stumbling on History.
So let's go through some of your books, because I want all the viewers to see all the fabulous books that you've written, and maybe you can make a little caption or soundbite about what each one is about, because they're beautiful books, just beautiful.
Thank you. Well, Motherland was the first. Like you said, it was written 20 years ago. It's a memoir of returning with my mother to her very small town in Germany and how that transformed our relationship. So a mother-daughter story, in addition to addressing the legacy of the Holocaust in us and in Germany. After I wrote this book, I learned how my mother had gotten here, and I wrote a high school book called Is It Night or Day? And this captures my mother's childhood immigration experience. She was one of what's now called the 1,000 children. Of course, Roosevelt didn't want a role in the rescue. And so Lutherans, Quakers, and Jewish groups organized. They brought over 10 kids at a time on cruise ships, 100 a year between 34 and 45. They saved about 1,400 children. And these children are known as the 1,000 children. This is the American program. And my mother was one of the 1,000 children. And this book captures the story of childhood immigration and Americanization and assimilation. So it's used in a lot of middle schools, and in both the Holocaust unit as well as the immigration unit. After students read Is It Night or Day, they asked me what happened to my mother's best friend on the ship.
Yeah.
Edith and Gerda were inseparable. They were both traveling alone. They were both 12 years old. Well, I didn't really know what had happened to her, and I tried to find her, but couldn't because I didn't even have her last name. Well, some students in a local school took it upon themselves to locate and reunite these two old friends 72 years after they had last seen each other. They were successful. The Oprah Winfrey Network got hold of the story, and they actually granted me the rights to the screenshots of the reunion. And this book, like Finding My Twin, How an Eighth Grade Class Reunited Two Holocaust Refugees, is actually used as a model for service learning for
Nice.
school.
Excellent.
I did mention to you Stumbling on History. Stumbling on History actually captures my mother's and my return to the small town in 2014, where they installed Stolpersteine to remember the family. And of course, you can see here the last picture taken of the family intact. And then, of course, the stones that now sit in front of what was the former residence where my mother's family had lived for over 200 years in the same house.
Which is just amazing.
Finally,
and I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second because I want everyone to know what a Stolpersteine brick is. Of course, you and I know what it is, but go ahead and give that explanation. And then before you do that, what is so moving, incredible, that your family literally lived in this town for over 200 years in this same town.
Yes, well, and actually Gerda's family, the friend my mom had, her family lived in the town 1,000 years.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
So these are Stolpersteine. If you've been to Europe, you've seen these little bronze plaques, and they basically are memorial stones to remember the victims of the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Finally, I did a book about my mother's best friend Gerda's story. Remarkably, Gerda's family got out at the last minute through a little-known program in the Dominican Republic. And this program, organized by Rafael Trujillo, who was a dictator, who had a terrible reputation for massacring 25,000 Haitians for the color of their skin, decided he wanted to improve his global image. And so he decided he would take in some of the Jews. He had another reason for wanting to do this. He was hoping they would intermarry and lighten his people's race. So you're talking about some people who were persecuted for their religious beliefs in Germany and then prized for the color of their skin in the Dominican Republic.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
So this book captures Gerda's family story. She was separated from her family for 21 years because for a lot of reasons, but eventually she would be reunited with her parents and they would meet their grandchildren.
Oh, how beautiful. That's amazing.
Most recently, I've been doing other work, but they're all related to some of this story. And I did a couple of picture books, which are for my granddaughter. And I was worried that my granddaughter would feel the way my mother felt, which was, why did my parents send me away? Why couldn't my granddaughter see me during the pandemic? And I feared she might think that I didn't love her anymore, which was an issue my mother carried around her whole life. And so I wrote a couple of picture books which capture this whole idea of, maybe you don't love me anymore. And of course, nothing could be farther from the truth, and that I'm waiting every day
right
so we can be together once again.
Absolutely.
And finally, my most recent work is in somewhat related because children of the Holocaust have two responses to their parents. One is they do what I did, which is try to repair and take care of their damaged parent, or they head for the hills and they distance themselves. Well, my brother and I suffered with an estrangement for many decades. And I wrote this book, which is about sibling estrangement. It combines memoir as well as the social science of sibling estrangement, a topic that's rarely discussed.
Yes.
It's called Brothers, Sisters, Strangers, Sibling Estrangement and the Road to Reconciliation. And I'm happy to tell you that my brother, with whom I'm reconciled for 7 years, wrote the afterword.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I can't wait to read that. I cannot wait to read it. That sounds fascinating. And how healing and moving for you, I hope, you know.
Absolutely.
You
It
know,
was a pain that went very deep for a long
of
time.
course.
And the thing about estrangement is it ripples through life. It doesn't just affect you and your brother. It affects, of course, the larger family, but then it affects who you can trust and
Yeah.
how, and your own self-esteem. And so it's a very damaging experience.
Yes.
And people tend to ruminate quite a bit because it's so disturbing.
Sure, sure. And I just want to finish up our talk here today with your plans now for, you have a feature film in the works, and you also have a play reading happening at the Raven Theater in Chicago next spring. Is that right?
Well, as far as the feature film, yes, Hallmark had optioned it, and they had Anne Bancroft, who was going to be my mother. However, sadly, she passed away right around the time when the movie was supposed to be filmed. So the option's still available. And then
Yes.
a friend and I did write the stage play, and we are going to have a festival in May of next year in Chicago at the Raven Theater. And Motherland, the play, is the opening night feature.
Oh, wonderful. That's wonderful. I hope I can be in Chicago to be in the audience for that.
Okay.
That would be amazing. I want to just close out our talk today with this last passage here that, oh my gosh, I just love this so much. You say here, when we are children, M.R. Montgomery writes, there is no point in jumping into the swimming pool unless they, parents, see you do it. The child crying, watch me, is not begging for attention. He is pleading for existence itself. They will remember, they will hold it, keep it, make it true. Everything else is dreams and not memories. And then you go on to say that for your mother, going back to, I don't want to mispronounce the name of the town. Yeah, was about reclaiming and repossessing some of those memories, and that you were there with her to watch her jump back into the pool. And it just, you know, I think that one of the beauties of literature is that it allows us to just resonate with our fellow human beings in a way that gives us the opportunity. We live in such a digital society right now, and we're taking in all this content on the computer, like right now, or your phone, or, you know, we love to hear music, we love to go to the movies, we love to go to the theater, but reading is something that we can do in our own time sequence, at our own pace. And so when I come across passages like that, I'm able to just kind of either put the book down and really think about it and reflect upon it, or I can keep reading and then go back and read it over, try and, you know, feel that experience again. But I just want to give you go ahead. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I want to just say a couple things. One is, obviously, literature is crucial to developing a deep sense of empathy. And that's the thing that scares me most about people who read less and less and less.
Yeah.
You lose that human connection. So yeah, and I was going to go somewhere else with that, but I forgot my second point. It'll come to me.
That's okay. That's all right. I'm so grateful to meet you and get to know you now. And I know that this is just the beginning of what I hope will be a really long and fertile relationship between the two of us. You have so much to offer and share. You're such a beautiful artist and writer. And we didn't even touch on your journalism, but we can go back there if we have another interview.
I haven't done journalism a long time, really.
Okay.
I do a few things here and there, but mostly what I've been doing are the books. So,
yeah,
but
right.
I'm really excited about your film as well, and I so want to say that each story is unique and worthy of our attention.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much. We're fighting the good fight. We're pushing the boulder up the hill every day, and we will get there. It's an exciting time for us. But I
Well,
want,
if there's anything I can do, I hope you'll let me know.
I absolutely will. Thank you. And thank you everybody for tuning in today and coming back to our first, we took this hiatus with Banter with Beth over the summer. And so it's great to be back, and it's wonderful having you on today, Fern. Thank you so very much. Everyone knows that we will post this on IGTV when we finish. And then later this afternoon, we'll post it on the Beth Lane Film YouTube channel. So it can be seen, over, if people couldn't hear or missed or whatever, you guys can come back and listen to some more. Fern, it's such a pleasure to meet you. Next time I'm in Chicago, I'll make sure you know that I'm there and we can
Oh,
get
I
together.
love that. That would be wonderful.
Good.
Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody.